Hi, I'm Stephen Hevern. I'm a senior technical account manager at AWS, and I'm based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Welcome to AWS Supports You, where AWS support experts provide tips to optimize performance in the cloud, lower your costs, and provide you with the best practices and design considerations. Joining me today are Vigyen, Abdul, and George Gio from AWS Support. Can you give us a quick introduction, Vigyen?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Vigyan Luharia. I'm an enterprise support manager here at AWS, based out of the Virginia location. I manage a team of technical account managers, what we internally call as TAMs. And together, our team strives to bring the best customer experience we can to our AWS customers. When I'm not working, believe it or not, I watch NFL games and I keep sipping my ginger tea. I look forward to see you all today. Thank you.
Hello,
Abdul?
hello everyone. I'm Abdul Muhammad. I'm a senior technical account manager based out of Virginia. In my time role, I love supporting my enterprise support customers. But when I'm not working, I love spending time with my two kids. I have a 4-year-old and a 9-year-old, and these days I've been learning a big deal on block programming from him, and looking forward for today.
Gio?
Awesome. So, greetings. I'm George Neese, aka Gio. I'm a customer health manager, senior customer health manager out of Minneapolis in the land of frozen sunshine, aka Minnesota. So, welcome. Glad you're here.
Great. Thanks all. Today, we look forward to an exciting interactive conversation around driving resilience with proactive TAM engagement, nicknamed as Dr. Pet, and how it can help you meet your resilience objectives. Before we get into the details, a quick note to the attendees online. Use the chat window on the right-hand side of your screen to let us know where you're joining us from today, and share your thoughts and questions throughout the episode. We look forward to hearing from you. We will also provide a link to our survey. Please let us know how we did by clicking on the link and sharing your feedback. Again, to get started, I'm curious to know what led you to conceptualize and launch this initiative to provide proactive guidance on resilience improvements for our AWS enterprise support customers.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. So resilience, it's a topic which is very close to my heart based on my operational experience. And when I look at resilience and I look at some of the challenges the customers might be facing in terms of the uncertainty or what to do next, I feel like it's almost like having a spare tire in your car, but you do not know how to really install it, or at the time when you need it the most, you find that it's not in a working order. So resilience to me really spurs that idea. Why do we need to wait for an impact or an outage to really tell us that we could have done something better? We could have recovered from this faster. And because of that idea, I started kind of digging around and I started looking around for my AWS enterprise support customers. What is it that they would think in terms of getting prepared for resilience? What I really uncovered in my conversation with some of the customer leadership is the customers definitely need help. They need help and guidance to understand when to use the AWS services and tools and how effectively to use them so that they can really be able to come out of the outage and have better mitigation plan. And number two, what I also uncovered from the customers is many customers do have the business continuity planning or the DR teams, but the resource attrition is real, and some of the documentation that the customers carry have never been really tested. So they lack the confidence to implement these documents at the time when that execution is needed. So that really brought the idea of proactive guidance. Why do we really not really move away from the reactive scenarios, bring it upfront as proactive guidance? And I started thinking, what would be that best entity to really carry that forward and not make it a one and done exercise? And I thought about technical account managers, the TAMs, because TAMs bring in continuous and consistent engagement to our enterprise support customers. With TAMs in the middle of helping our customers with their resilient engagement journey, we can really provide the best prescriptive and definitive guidance with some measurable results and definitive outcomes. So what is this Dr. PET that we internally call the program as? And DR PET stands for Driving Resilience with Proactive Engagement by TAMs. So what is this program all about? How does it really work? How does it benefit you? And what are some of those exciting, cool customer use case stories that are actually talking about how this program has been super beneficial to them. Joining us today is Abdul, who is a technical account manager, as well as a program lead, who's going to really help us understand what Dr. Pet framework is all about. Abdul, over to you.
Thank you, Vigyan, for setting the context for why we needed this framework more than ever. In the next few slides, I'm going to go provide an overview and walk you through the Dr. Pet process framework. But I'm going to start from some of the AWS services and tools that are out there that help our customers around the resilience side of things. But more importantly, I want to talk about the customer challenges, what led us to come up with a framework like Dr. Pet. And then I'm also going to talk about how to get started. And then I will give it away to George, who is going to talk about some exciting customer success stories who have went through the program. And a quick reminder to all of you, please post your questions on chat. And Steve is going to moderate and is going to interrupt me if needed. So without further ado, let's begin. So as I said earlier, AWS has many services and tools. And here I have a very small list of services and tools that are helping our customers around resilience, and our customers love using them. Of course, I couldn't get all the services on this one single slide, but the idea is to give you a, a reference point. So services like AWS Trusted Advisor, AWS Well Architected Framework are our self-service tools, which are helping our customers with their best practice guidance. And then there are services like AWS Resilience Hub, which helps our customers by providing an assessment report and really helping them understand if they will be able to meet their RTO and RPO requirements, which stands for recovery time objective and recovery point objectives. On the enablement side, for customers who are looking to learn more, we do have resources like immersion days, and I highlighted specifically about the disaster recovery workshops. The link for that would be in the chat soon, but those are some of the workshops which you can run in your own accounts and learn more about how to use some of our services to have a resilient architectures. We also have AWS Tech Talks, blogs, summits, white papers, where we are constantly adding more and more guidance for our customers. But more importantly, what are some of the customer challenges we heard and why we came up with the framework? So one challenge we heard from the customers was that there are many services out there, and customers often find challenging to identify when to use which service and which tool. And that is our problem number one. On the other side, we also have some customers who are really adept on using our services and tools. But what we found is they could benefit from having a designated resource within AWS whom they can tap into and have them walk them through their architecture, their tech stack, and provide them some very prescriptive guidance around resilience. And that is where we came up with the framework. And remember, many of our customers are big organizations who already have these business continuity plans and teams who execute them, as Vigyan mentioned earlier. But what we also found is there is a lack of confidence in some of the customers who are not ready to run those mitigating plans. And what that leads them is to extended outages, impact to their business. And also on our end, we are on a desperate act to try to help them during their application outage to try to understand their workload, their architecture, and be able to help them. So that led us to a program. And resilience is a journey, as you all can understand. So what I'm going to talk about is the process framework for the Dr. Pet, as we dub it internally. We have three, Dr. Pet is comprises of three different stages, starting from discovery, deep dive, live fire testing. So I'm going to talk about discovery. So what we really do in our discovery stage is we identify the most business critical workloads for the customer, and this is with the help of the customer. And once we identify those workloads, we gather more information about their resilience needs for those specific workloads. And this is when we bring in the primary TAM or designated TAM who is supporting the customer already, and also the solution architect who is also part of the account team who our enterprise support customers are benefiting from. But along with them, we also assign Dr. Pet practitioner. Our practitioners are our resources who are deep into resilience side of things, and they are there to lead that conversation, help the conversation, and really identify those elements and components within your architecture which might need further deep dive, where they might find some risk or vulnerabilities and they feel like we should have a detailed or deep dive conversation. So the outcome from the discovery is really what the practitioner and the team come up with as an assessment from that conversation. And then we will take it forward and bring in a subject matter expert depending on what was called out in that assessment. So if there was a compute resource, if there was a serverless resource, whichever component was called out for the further deep dive, we bring in a subject matter expert with that technical domain expertise. And these subject matter experts are our specialist solution architects who have focused specifically on the resilience side of things in their respective technical domains. And that is the pool of specialist solution architects that we'll be pulling in for a deeper dive discussion. And with those discussions, the idea is to help the customer with some prescriptive guidance so the customers can take those guidance, go back and implement that in their lower environments, test it, and update their playbooks and runbooks, and really feel confident in the recommendations they have gained. But all of this won't really matter if they were not testing it in their pre-prod or an environment closer to the prod. So we support our customers, our designated TAMs do support our customers in their major launches already. So this will be similar kind of a support where they help the customer during their failover testing. But the emphasis or focus here is to capture the results, capture the findings from those failover testings. And if there are further discussions needed, then the primary TAM and the practitioner will go ahead and pull in our subject matter expert for further discussions. And this is really what we are trying to help our customers in their resilience journey. And we are hearing great stories. Our customers who went through this program, they like the fact that they are able to get very prescriptive guidance and able to build their resilient architectures based on those guidance. And that is helping them in a faster recovery and be able to achieve much faster RTOs and RPOs. And with the Doctor Pad being focused as a proactive plan, we are helping our customers to identify and reduce those risks in advance and also minimize their outages if by taking those actions proactively. And overall, customers are finding more confident in their ability to execute those plans when they need them, because these are tested plans. They would have done the live fire testing and they would repeat that every 6 months depending on their regular cadence. But our customers are finding much confident by going through this program and really getting that prescriptive guidance from our subject matter experts. If you are interested for enterprise support customers, please reach out to your TAM and your TAMs will help you with the onboarding and next steps. With that, I would want to give it away to George to talk about some of the customer success stories. But before we go there, I want to check in with Steve and see if there are any questions on the chat.
Thanks, Abdul. Yeah, we have a couple of questions in the chat. First up from High Tech D3. Is it required for organizations to have a CSP to manage AWS accounts? What's the benefit of a CSP? Any fixed resource discounts? So I think that's a little off topic from where we're discussing, but I'd like to jump in and answer it unless somebody else wants to take it. So, all right, cool. A CSP, and I think this is sometimes this terminology can go and be different for different companies and different organizations and mean different things. So I think for us, typically when you're talking about a cloud service provider, you're talking about somebody like us, like AWS or other providers that do similar services. I think the other context that you might be asking this in is, going through a partner or someone else, another organization that might help you with it. You may not have the capacity or the resources in which to do some of this management yourself. So you'll hire a third party and go through them to manage your resources on AWS. And there can be different benefits of either coming directly to us or going through a third party. really depends on what your needs are. Something that you can, reach out to AWS on and have more conversations about. The second question, also from High Tech D3, was asking if there's any benefits to commercial FinOps tools such as NetApp Spot compared to native cost optimization tools. And I'm going to kind of give you the it depends answer, a bit of a typical IT answer on what you're trying to do. Depending on how big your organization is, depending on how big your AWS landscape is, I think a lot of our native tools are great and can really provide some benefits. But if you need to also manage on-premise, or you need to manage other cloud service providers, there might be a reason to go to another service set of tools and things like that. We do have a lot of tools to manage FinOps directly, from Cost Explorer, budgets, Trusted Advisor, Cost Intelligence Dashboard. We have a lot of different tools and stuff there. So what I will do is point you to a link in the chat as well that points to our Cloud Foundations, which I think really gives a good overview of being able to get started here on AWS to be able to get set up and running with things. So back to questions that I actually have two questions. First is AWS, I think you said this, but I want to make sure it's clear for our audience. Is this only something for AWS enterprise support customers? And Vigyan, I think that's you taking that, you're on mute.
Sorry, yeah, I was on mute. Hey, so yeah, Steve, thanks. So I think the question you said is this only for AWS enterprise support customers? The short answer is, at this point in time, yes. Dr. Pet program is heavily, relying its framework with the technical account managers being that consistent entity, like I spoke about, right? But having said that, if there's any customers out there that are looking for resilience guidance, I would advocate for them to talk to the account team at AWS, and the account team can then internally triage that request to any of these subject matter experts and help the customers with what their resilience objectives are.
Great, thanks. Another question I have, because I like to get into the details of things when I learn about them, is what's a typical engagement timeline look like?
I can take that. It really depends. It depends on the complexity of the architecture, depends on the components that are being discussed. In some cases, we are seeing that it could be just a matter of couple hours of interaction, having those deep dive sessions. And in some cases, the customers are also asking to take one component at a time. So it really depends. But what we are seeing is, and what we are really doing with the program is really helping the customer in their overall journey. So we are going to support them overall for their architecture until the architecture is resilient. We are going to continue to support them.
Great, thanks. I don't have any other questions in chat, so Gio, I guess we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So we're going to talk a bit about customer resilience stories. The key with all of this, of course, is that every customer has a different set of services, people, processes, mechanisms, all these things that become really important in terms of the journey, because it's very unlikely that any large customer or even small customers, startups and people just getting going with AWS and their cloud adoption journey and the rest really have the identical same environment. So let's dive into a couple of those. So the first one, in terms of situation, and as you probably know, at AWS and Amazon, we really like star format, the situation, tasks, action, and results. And of course, results matter for all of us, especially at that time of the year when we're doing performance. So this was an impact around a FinServ call center. So financial services depend on their call centers to interact with their customers. So a Fortune 500 FinServ company, 100 years, if I told you where they were located or anything more about them, you would know exactly who these folks are. So insurance, mortgage, and annuities are their products. And so their call center was down during the Pearl Harbor Day 2021 AWS service outage. So primarily, this is a result not so much of just an impact that we're seeing here, but it resulted, of course, in financial and reputational damage, because as you well know, If I am calling to report that I have had an accident or somebody in my family has had some kind of negative impact and I need to get someone on the phone, when I can't get them on the phone, that becomes a very stressful situation. It becomes very public, very visible. Everybody finds out about it pretty quick. It's like anything else. When we talk about these, Dr. Pet engagements, one of our goals is that when there is an impact in some kind of service zone, region, that you hear about it on Twitter tomorrow. So their call center being down, there was a desire to earn back the lost trust of everyone involved. So that's a super important thing here too, when you think about it, because things break. As one of our favorite Amazonians, Werner Vogels, would say, everything breaks all the time, hopefully not at the same time, because that then creates a whole lot more stress. So if you think about it, a call center is a very complicated set of not only services, but there are things in front of that and behind that that are really not necessarily tied to specific pieces of AWS, Amazon Web Services, and the individual services in this case, or composite of services that make up a call center. Because a call center is not just one piece of software. There's connections in terms of direct connects. There's authentication and authorization for agents on one side. There's all of this work with customers just calling and the telcos that are involved with routing those calls to your call center and making sure that they actually get answered in a timely manner. Or you get into a phone tree that's going to give you guidance on how to get wherever you need to go and hopefully be able to not only tell how you're doing, but then measuring that sentiment, be able to get you to the right people. Of course, there's lots of linguistics and the rest of it that go into it. But if you think about it, in a specific region, we're running an Amazon Connect, which is our AWS call center product. We're typically always looking to run everything in multiple zones. So a zone corresponds to one or more data centers when you think about that. And of course, there are things that are routing traffic, whether that's from the agent side of things or from the side of just bringing incoming calls into the solution as well. A lot of folks have these kinds of solutions tied, if they still have on-prem or they've always had on-prem, to something that's outside of AWS and maybe in many other locations, or third-party services that are tied to it. So when we think about this is a complex, can have very complex issues. In this case, there was a regional impact, and that caused their call center to be unavailable to their agents and to their customers in both cases. So a disruption we have here that in the end, all the customer cares about is, I want to call you to talk about some issue I'm having. And when they can't do that, of course, that creates a lot of stress. So then what do we actually do with that? Well, first of all, when you're running in a single region, that gives you a significant amount of resilience. But as anyone who can tell you, across any cloud service provider, and of course, I'm speaking about AWS today, there can be impacts that can cause things in a region to become impaired, or in some cases unavailable. So here this discussion is around this Connect product, and hopefully I have not set off anybody's ALEXA in the last minutes. But so service dependency discussions and just the options for that, because of as Abdul mentioned and Vivian in introductions, this is about recovery point, recovery times, the cost. What is your business continuity plans? What are your DR plans, HA plans, fault tolerance? All of these things kind of, in many cases, either link or build upon one another. It's really difficult to believe that you could have a great DR strategy without having high availability, because of course these things actually tie together. So we talk through the dependencies of the services, because as I mentioned, many services have dependencies themselves. Most everything moves around AWS in Kinesis. We use CloudWatch to monitor everything. And obviously, we recommend people to do similar. When we're talking about a microservices-based architecture, which some of Connect is, we start thinking about Fargate and containers and ECS and all these kind of containerized services, looking at them with X-ray. So in all of this, it's not just a single service. Many times it's multiple. It's that interconnected weave or web of applications, custom things that you're doing, configuration that can actually change. And of course, we want to monitor. So what occurred here was a discussion to move these folks to a multi-region strategy. Now, multi-region means either active, passive, active, pilot light. There's a bunch of varieties there. When you get to, the right-hand side of that, which is active, of course, you see higher cost factors. Most people do not have an unlimited bag of money that they can just throw around for anything these days. And to be honest, I don't know that they ever did. But when we start thinking about some of these different strategies that we'll talk about a little bit later, there's decisions, there's cost benefit that comes in. And of course, as a Dr. Pet practitioner, adoption accelerator, and someone who just cares about customers not having impacts as a TAM and health manager, we want to make sure that these things are giving you what you need. Because as you probably know, TAMs, one of their main jobs as technical account managers in AWS is to make sure that you don't spend any more than you need to get what you need out of AWS to support your customers, your applications, all the things that you've got running. So is that as some kind of magic power? No, it's people talking and looking and working, and all of it ties into things like cost optimization and right sizing and all these things. So the director of cloud infrastructure, when we were done, decided to go to a multi-region resiliency strategy for Amazon Connect. That means they're going to run active in 2 regions. That is a very big decision. It's not something that someone should take lightly, and it should be something that you explore. So as the director of cloud infrastructure, one of my good friends said, we had significant concerns after December 7th in the service event. This engagement was fantastic and gave us exactly the information we needed to inform and guide our business continuity team on AWS resilience. Because when you think about it, zonal resilience, regional resilience, services connected, this is not just like fall out of bed one day and you know how to do all this stuff, or you even taking a certain number of certifications will give you a lot of detail, but will that be specifically about your workload? Probably needs to be a little bit more of a team approach. There's very few places in resilience where you can Lone Ranger things, which you would have been able to do maybe back in the Unix Dilbert nerd days. So the next thing we're going to hit is healthcare life sciences and an enrollment impact. So when we start talking about, financial services and call centers, well, health sciences in this case, with a containerized set of microservice applications running, had a similar extended outage. Resilience in 2022 for AWS was tied to a number of things that happened in December of 2021. A lot of programs and initiatives and all sorts of work behind the scenes, service teams, thus us, TAMs, health managers, all of us came together to really focus, hardcore focus on getting people's applications resilient, understanding where customers might have risk. And can we look in a crystal ball to see that? No, of course, it's monitoring, it's looking at reports, it's doing all these things. And in some cases are just a lot of work. So a Fortune 100 company, again, if I said too much more, you would know exactly who these folks are. If I said where their office was located or anything else, you would probably know right away who they are. And of course, running microservices is a complex web in itself, because it's not just one service that's doing something typically. It's a web of services interacting in a composite, containerized. We're chaining things together. We're putting all that to give a response, whether that's something in a web, a report, a data engineering pipeline, what have you. So they experienced an extended outage on their business critical applications. This was not just one application, this was multiple, and it was a significant amount of working with them on the day it occurred, as well as, of course, all of the time as a Dr. Pet practitioner. You prioritize the workloads that are most important. You start to work through those, because in all of this, this is not the magic lucky cat. The lucky cat, cute, all sorts of awesome, does not suddenly bring you luck that's going to let your workloads run with unabated joy when there's a major problem. It takes much more than that. And so when you think about it, the guidance here that's required from the C-suite was to be sure of future business continuity. Now, the only way you can be sure is if you test it, you verify. So trust but verify. Always with these engagements, it's a case of seeking to understand before being understood. If I just walk into every one of these engagements and I have a preset canned set of like, you need to do this, most of the time I'm probably not going to be right. So we have to explore what you're doing, go through things like well architected, because literally this is the reliability pillar of well architected. Now, obviously, again, because there's not a giant bag of money that everyone has under the bed that they can just whip out typically, we would need to make sure that it's going to get you what you need based on the costs. So there's a portion of that pillar that's in it. And of course, like anything else, this has to be sustainable. And so you can end up with a whole lot of pillars when you start thinking about it. So what we want to make sure is that we have a situation that allows us to not only know within reason that we are going to be resilient when something goes wrong. So the issue here, of course, is during enrollment. That's when people are signing up. And this isn't just like the one-off enrollment when you have a baby, which is great. Congratulations to anybody on that. Getting married, start a new job. All of these things give you individual opportunities to go into the enrollment process. This is during the main enrollment process in the year. And if I can't actually have the application function, there's going to be obviously huge visibility. Many customers, it's customers of customers who are now impacted. And of course, not surprisingly, when they can't get their dental insurance or change their medical plan or do whatever else, when they're thinking they're going to do it, people get very frustrated. And so then you get the call center lit up and all these things. So when you think about it, this is a complex set of possibly, for these folks, moving to a cellular architecture rebuild. So for those applications, what this means is we've got multiple stacks. This goes back to the old days, if people remember all of their app server technology. I got cluster A, I got cluster B, I got cluster however many else. This is basically similar to that kind of mentality or architecture or mechanism where we're considering what it is that we can spread out. We, of course, have to have load balancers and containerized instances as far as that goes, because there's nodes and pods and containers and all of this stuff has to work. We have to have places to put stuff. So we have to have some kind of persistent volume claims and PVCs in and of themselves. So the idea here is then there's an orchestration that ties into this. We are going to monitor it with CloudWatch, with CloudTrail. Maybe we're going to use some of our favorite third-party providers because, no surprise, we love a lot of other things. It doesn't matter that your application is exactly like this picture. You could maybe be having Datadog or New Relic or Dynatrace or AppDynamics or something else, because all of these folks, to be honest, are friends of the family. We welcome all when it comes to getting things to be resilient. And of course, customers have a complex mix of AWS native. They might have stuff in other clouds, which we won't talk about today. And all are welcome in AWS, of course, but there might be more to it than that. So for those of you who are on AWS native, I will give you my Munchlax award. If you don't know what a Pokemon is, then you probably don't have small children, or you might have been old school Pokemon person. So in the end, with this cellular rebuild, what do we have? Well, we start talking about RPO of 0 with these folks. Well, if you want a 0, that means you almost certainly have to be active somehow. Maybe passive, pilot light. We'll mention a couple of these other things and we'll look at them. But the whole idea here is then building out some skills. So muscle memory, some chaos engineering, some AWS native observability game days. These things give you hands-on with services. This means the team picks up skills and then thinks about how they're going to apply them. So rebuilding these prioritized applications, because not everything is tier 0. Not everything is business critical. Not everything needs to be active possibly. Some things do. Live fire testing, of course, because no surprise, we want run books and playbooks that actually tell people, if this happens and it doesn't automatically resolve itself, here's how we're going to get the right people on the phone. We're going to get all of our bridges open, the bridge for the people who want to find out what's going on, the bridge for people fixing it, and probably the leadership bridge where they're talking about how they're going to tell the CEO or CXO what happened and how they might show up. So this testing, of course, makes sure that you know what's going to happen. It gives people, again, that muscle memory for when there is an issue. And it lets them know that with confidence, the team will be able to handle these things. So the SVP of Customer Solutions. So this is a business person. This is not a tech nerd. This is not geo-nerdery or something else. Said December 7th was an eye-opener for us. Working with AWS and our technology partners has given us confidence for the future. And that's what you want. You want confidence. You want to know that you're going to get what you're going to get. And that you're going to be, again, having a smooth process, whether it's at 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon. Obviously, we'd like it to be during your workday. So availability zones are data centers. When there's an issue there, most of the time we recommend always to be running 3 in this case, 3 zones. So 3 AZs, people sometimes, because we shortcut everything, honestly. In AWS, we have as many acronyms as everybody else does. So lots of acronyms. There's versioning. There's tied back to how you're going to get things lit back up in the event that you do have a specific zonal. There can be thoughts about capacity planning and all these things that tie into it. Because if you're running a certain set of services, you may have some things that you have to consider if you're moving around in terms of ramping things up, capacity planning. Again, trust but verify. The Dovri Povri, for folks who remember that kind of stuff back from the Reagan and our friends, Boris Yeltsin, from the Russian side of things. So the regional resilience is a bit different because now we're talking about something that can go wrong. Now, AWS has a COE, correction of error process. It's very likely that we would not have the exact same issue fail. So planning for things that have already happened, well, we do that. We like other people to follow along in that journey. So that's all things that are super important. If you have a regional issue, what do? Well, then you probably want multiple region if the application really had to be up and there was some kind of negative impact. So those strategies, well, backup and restore, it's all about what is the cost. And as you move from left to right or right to left, depending on which way you're going to read this, you're going to see that active, of course, has the $4 signs. That means in Yelp terminology, that would be like Daniel in New York, where you're probably going to spend 500 or 600 bones on lunch or dinner. And then you move it over here to your $1 sign and you can pick your favorite fast food restaurant and probably get that. And somewhere in the middle, we start to get into bigger numbers. And so when we think about it, these solutions are about understanding what is the highest priority business critical applications you have and what are the RPOs and RTOs, minutes, hours, or have to be like working all the time. And so we walk through those. So that's what I had. And I really appreciate folks coming in today. We'll have some more stuff going on, but I think I'll go ahead and hand that back.
Thanks, Gio. Appreciate all of that. A lot of information that you've got. We don't have any questions right now in the chat, but I do have a few questions for all of you. I guess, and this is something that I think a lot of people can get confused on. Can you maybe go into a little bit of detail on the difference between a highly available environment and a resilient environment?
Yeah, I guess I can probably take that. So I don't want to be hogging time and the rest of it, but you think about it, high availability is designed to avoid component failure. So applications, that means we've got extra instances. We've got in a containerized environment, we expect that we'll flush a container, we'll flush a node or a pod, and then we'll jack one right back up. When we get to disaster recovery, the difference here is we're talking about a disaster, something that really, if you think about it, we see these almost every day, whether we watch it on social media, our favorite, newspaper, the news shows, you'll see somebody's having a disaster almost every day. If your data center happens to be near that, whether it's AWS's or some other component that you're relying on, there's probably going to be something major that happens. Now we have to think about how are we going to stand something else up, copy it, move it, have it already ready. Well, if it's not already copied, now what are we going to do? We're going to rebuild it. So there's lots of strategies that come into these things, whether it's high availability and we're talking about scaling things up and down, or disaster recovery when we may need to move things and rehydrate a site or an application. So great question. Thank you, Stephen.
Sure. Got another one for you. Back to the technical details on the putting this together, the program for our customers and stuff. Will you build the playbook or run book for the customer?
I can take that. So with the program, we definitely are going to help the customers by providing the technical guidance and assistance they need. But building the playbook, owning the playbook is really on customers to own them. But we are here to provide the technical guidance.
Okay, cool. We do have a question from the chat from Gifted Greedy. Is disk speed the bottleneck for why backup and restore is the slowest DR?
So I guess I can take that one. I think the thing is there's a number of things that can be part of backup and restore, because literally if you're copying something, and something major happens with a region or something else, well, all of a sudden, this is what your strategy looks like. It's the Mickey Mouse strategy. Why is that? Because you just encountered the thundering herd. That means everybody else is having a problem too. Holy smokes. If everybody has the same problem at the same time, you can bet there's going to be like bottlenecks in terms of network, in terms of just throttling for all these different things, because I can't copy the entire contents of one thing over to another thing if everyone else is trying to do it at the same time. I might run into issues in terms of disk speed and those kinds of things. It's about making sure that you're right size and you understand your IOPS and all those kind of nerd terms. We could definitely get into more there because we talk tech detail as TAMs. That's why we have to be certified in all sorts of AWS stuff to be technical account managers, as all of us can attest to.
Yeah, that plan kind of goes out the window when everybody's contending and you've got that contention for the same resources, and then you're wondering, why doesn't it work? Well, that's, you didn't plan for everybody needing that all at once in that disaster, right? Cool. So we talk a lot about resilience. So how does this program differ from other resilience initiatives?
Yeah, I can take that, Steve. So when we talk about resiliency, right? I mean, it's a broader umbrella, right? It encompasses many things. Like what you have heard on this talk show today is many components of what constitutes a resilient architecture or a resilience journey. Within AWS, we have a huge focus on resilience. We have a huge focus on making sure that the customers who are struggling in terms of keeping their high availability or continuous availability SLAs, how do we best meet those needs? So there's many teams, many programs, many services that have been launched very successfully within AWS framework. But where the challenge is how does a customer know when to tap these services, how to tap these services? And that's where we are trying to simplify the process. So for enterprise support customers, the customer doesn't really have to run around and figure out, oh, should I be using a DRS strategy or the pilot light, like what George was talking about and all right? Why not I tap into my technical account manager, define my requirements, define my problem statement, and have my TAM kind of do that legwork internally within AWS and get the best subject matter expert. So it's not of a program on its own, it's more of a collaborative approach. Dr. Pet is just providing you with the framework of how to tap the best services and the best resources within AWS and how to stay consistent on that engagement. Many times what has happened is a customer is running into issues which are sort of related to the failover not working or the resilience side of things. And what they'll do is they'll open up a support case. A support engineer comes in, provides them with a workaround or a quick resolution, and that's the one and done on that story, right? What we are getting into is that's not the end of the story. How are we going to take this further? How can we prevent that from happening in the first place? And where else could this impact? So as you talk to the customers consistently during your cadence calls, which all TAMs are required to do, once a week or twice a week with their customers, right? That story kind of continues to say, if application A could see that, down the road, you could have this impact happening with many other applications. So that is where AWS resiliency programs kind of stand up to, what is going to fit the best need for that type of scenario. And a TAM is going to be coming in, or account team with their solution architects or whatever relationship the customer has with AWS can bring in that subject matter, expert, and then we can work on a targeted approach. We can work with a prescriptive guidance sort of approach to say, let's take this specific requirement, let's dive deeper, and let's see what we can come out with in terms of a solution for this. What is that plan B that is going to take care of this workload not failing, or if it fails, how to recover faster? So, yeah.
And I was going to say, yeah, I have to say that with customers, it's helping them get another set of eyes on things sometimes, even is just enough to look for some of those corner cases or some of those things that may not have been considered. And it's great to be able to pull in that help and expertise. We do have a question. We have a couple more questions coming in from chat. JibJab06 wants to know, what types of workloads can Dr. Pet help with? Or what types of workloads can it help with?
I can take that. Dr. Pet is mostly going to focus on AWS services, any workloads you run on AWS using AWS services and tools. Dr. Pet program is going to focus on helping you with those workloads. We also understand you might have some dependencies. As long as your workload is primarily hosted on AWS, we will work with you to extend our help as well.
Okay, cool. Another question from the audience, High Tech D3. Can you give a short primer on local zones and if they play a role in this context?
So I guess I could take that one. So local zones are a great idea and a great implementation, but you think about it like anything else. So if I take a local zone, if I take something that's in a smaller footprint data center, that's perfect. But the idea here, of course, is that very likely that local zone is probably going to be subjected to all the same kinds of restrictions in terms of connectivity and those kinds of things. So are you going to put everything in a local zone? Maybe. But hopefully that's something that you are figuring out how you're going to make it resilient in other places, because that's a zone. And we like multi-zone when we start talking about things. This is the same reason why it would be fine to put an outpost in every one of your storefronts, but then you better make sure that you've got the right connectivity for that. You've got all that kind of like what happens when somebody, decides to pour their Diet Coke down your data center and your outpost. All of those things, even if it's in a cage, somebody gets it wet, there's going to be something bad happen. Well, local zone's less likely, but because it's still a single zone, you need to consider what that resilience is going to look like. So great question. Thank you. And there's way more to read. Honestly, you could go on reading for the rest of your life.
Yeah, definitely. So with this program, with what you're putting together with the customers, can the customers practice a business continuity or outage, or in a test or dev environment? How would they go about testing this, and what could we help them with here in this program?
Yep, I can take that. We definitely highly recommend that customers test their mitigation plans in their lower environments. So dev and test is definitely what we highly recommend. But what we also are finding is in some cases, customers are finding some additional gaps when they take their mitigation plans and run it in a pre-prod or a prod environment. So we highly recommend that they start from testing on a dev and test environments, but also make sure to test it in a pre-prod or any cloned environment that is as close as to prod, so they get the full confidence of being able to execute it in future.
Okay. And I guess a question around that with the testing, can something like our fault injection simulator service play a role with what you're helping your customers with?
Yeah, I guess I can take that one. So we love chaos engineering, and FIS, or fault injection simulator, is of course our chaos engineering service. This is really about being able to test and have a set of cases so that anytime you change something, you run your cases against the fault injection simulator for chaos, and you may bring other things in. We're actually working through some of the complex details of being able to do this with serverless, because obviously you can't just turn off an instance behind serverless and expect that that's number one available, because that's managed service. Serverless, as its name implies, means you do not manage the servers for that. So saying I'm going to bring down server X or Y or Z, probably not so much. But this whole idea of chaos is of course from some of our favorite customers. You can go out and read more about chaos engineering just in general. But we like the idea of people not only building these cases in a lower environment, but in many cases, people's production environments can't be replicated. Like, could you imagine being able to replicate a LinkedIn or a Facebook or whatever other huge social, environment that you'd have? It's not that easy to do and very unlikely. So now you need to start thinking about how you're going to test these things with FIS, turning off instances, doing serverless around some of the serverless Lambda stuff that we have. There's a variety of ways you could test SQS and Dynamo, and zonal failures are now one of the things that are hot with FIS. So lots there to do.
And I think that's another key for me and things that I have conversations with our customers is you make that part of your playbook, right? That's something, if you've documented that, then you can just regularly, you know what you need to test. And if you need to make modifications, then it becomes a lot easier to test. Because I know in a lot of large instances, testing is, you got to take a lot of time to do that. You got to take a lot of coordination and activity. If you can put that down into some automation and a playbook to help you out, I think that goes a long way to that. So great.
Yeah, and Steve, just quick interjection there. So, and that's exactly the point, right? I mean, what we're trying to, convey here is if you have a documented, mitigation plan, you can continue to enhance that. You can continue to build that and make it a repeatable exercise. In many of the services industries now, it's part of an audit requirement. You really are required, what you can call it as a dry run, or really the ability to test a very critical component of your workload before making a change to it in the real environments. You really need to know what happens if it fails, what happens if there's sort of errors that we see for the first time. You don't want to do that directly in a customer facing environment. So this program is also emphasizing that as you're understanding and identifying your most critical workloads, you're also identifying the risks associated with those workloads and what can we do to address those risks. So let's play that scenario in lower environments, build that playbook or the run book, right? And have confidence to execute that before we actually have to do it in the real environment. That's the nutshell of what we're trying to provide the guidance to our customers. And a lot of customers hesitate in doing that, because they don't have the resources, two, they may not have the skills to do it. And that's where we are saying we come in, we help you, we bring in the subject matter expertise, and your TAM is going to be answerable to your ongoing cadence calls as you need help.
And you can help, they can help work with you, make that live and adjust as they
Exactly.
grow or as their needs change.
Yep.
Well,
Sorry,
it's
Gio.
practice makes perfect, right?
Yep.
It's practice makes perfect. Like I see the ukulele on the back wall. You don't get good at ukulele just picking it up. You got to keep playing it. And if you put it down and you walk away for 6 months, you're not going to be near as good when you come pick it back up. So thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. That's, I mean, it fits. Any last thoughts, any closing things that maybe we didn't get to today on the call, on the show? Okay. With that, I don't see any more questions in the chat. So thank you all for coming today and showing up. This has been great. So today we looked at how enterprise support through the Dr. Pet program can help you bring prescriptive guidance to improve your resilience posture for your critical workloads running on AWS. If there's any questions that were not answered today, you can post your questions on repost.aws, where one of our experts can provide you with answers on your questions. They could become a topic for one of our future shows here. If you have feedback for us, please check the chat box on the right for that link to our survey, or you can email us at awssupportsyou@amazon.com. We want to hear from you. Tell us what you think and tell us what you'd like to see on the show. Please join us next week on Friday, February 6th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, where we'll be diving deep into AWS Systems Manager. For now, thanks for joining us on AWS Supports You. Happy cloud computing.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Go Eagles, go Chiefs.
Go Birds.